Hey everyone, and welcome. This is Daniel from Gator Truth Florida Football Podcast, and we have Jesse from Plant the Spear. For those that don't know, we had in the preseason a little podcast we did together called Fourth and Florida. We figured before we bring that back, we can at least talk about the upcoming Florida State game. How are you doing today, Jesse?
I'm good, man. Just ready for this game this weekend. I know most Florida State fans like myself are just ready to get this abysmal season over with, but that means playing this rivalry game on Saturday. And, it may not go the way we want. We don't know, but there's always a little bit extra something around rivalry games. So it's fun. I'm excited. I'll be down in Tallahassee for this one. I know you're going to be there as well. So we're going to link up for that game. And like you said, man, the Fourth and Florida podcast, where we will be excited to bring that back at some point. Obviously, it wasn't a great year to talk about things from our perspective. We also had a UCF pod on here as well that will be back with us, and they're kind of having a tough year too. So, yeah, man, we'll be back before you know it.
Yeah, I mean, Fourth in Florida, I don't know if that was a precursor to all of our seasons, being a nice little fourth down type deal, and definitely lots of feelings on wanting to punt the seasons for a few of us at this point. But I know at least the Gators are looking up. I mean, granted 6-5, but when you have back-to-back wins against LSU and Ole Miss, makes us feel a little bit better going into this one. Of course, I know there are some Gator fans who are, and we discussed off air talking about this could be, we're putting up 50, 60 points. And then there are other Gator fans who are like, this is a rivalry game and weird stuff happens and it's on the road at night in Doak Campbell. So who knows? Definitely cautiously optimistic. What are FSU fans feeling specifically about this game?
How fast can this clock hit zero? I think that's what we're feeling. But I think you're right, man. I do think I think we know anything can happen in a rivalry game. And I will say that, like, outside of the Notre Dame game and then like North Carolina, this team has had a really up and down year, right? Even at 2-9, like a lot of our losses, they were relatively close, right? We were able to keep the game somewhat close. A couple games you saw some quit in this team. And so the games got away from us, North Carolina, Notre Dame. So I do feel like, and I think a lot of people do believe that there is probably 0.1% chance of us that might think we can win. I think 99% of us think we're going to lose this game, but I do think some of us believe that if we show up and we actually play hard, like we're invested in the rivalry game, that we can at least give Florida a fight, right? Because we do have a ton of freshmen playing in this game. It's going to be we're really rolling the youth movement out right now. So I don't think we expect to win. I think we're just looking for a good game, and then let's get this season over with. Let's get on to the off season and turn our focus to 2025. But it's a rivalry game, man. So it's always fun. You're hoping for some inspired football.
No, I've got to ask because I know my people will want me to ask. With those feelings of just how quickly the clock can hit zero, but it's still a rivalry game. Would we see Florida State rush the field if they were to pull off the upset on Saturday?
Now, we don't typically rush the field, but I would lead the charge if we won this game. I don't give a darn if it's a 6-win Florida team. Look, after the season that we've had, I would probably lead the charge for that. No, I don't think so, but man, I can't make any promises because the season is more than 2-9, right? It's been a terrible 2-9. And so I really do think fans kind of look at this like, we don't expect to win, but if you were to be able to win, man, this would at least alleviate some of the pain. So I don't know that we rush the field, but hey, I will rush the field. You might get an ESPN notification like FSU fan gets tased rushing the field after Florida game. That will probably be me.
And you know what? Maybe I'll be there recording it. I'll just be looking. Oh, there he is.
Just tag me in it afterwards, man. That's all I ask.
Yeah. Happily. Oh, I will happily. I've randomly lucked into a few game tweets the past 2 weeks that have gone over 50,000 views, which for my podcast is ridiculous. So that'll be my this week. Hopefully not. Hopefully the Gators win and handily, but if not, I'm sure this will be the one that hits like hundreds of thousands.
Right.
Look at this FSU fan getting taste right there. Oh man. What you got for me, Jesse?
So yeah, man, just like I know, when we came into this season, obviously it's wild. Like we thought as Florida State fans that we were going to make probably a playoff run. We thought we were going to be really good. We had said that, we thought Florida might come into this game on a 7-game losing streak. Billy Napier might not even be the coach anymore. So I know you want to save, a lot of the ins and outs and details for your show, obviously there, but give me just some thoughts on where this season, how the season has gone, man. Do you feel like this is where like Florida should kind of be given the things that have happened? Do you feel like they've overachieved or underachieved? Because obviously the story is with us is we have massively underachieved, but just kind of, man, what's your thoughts on this one?
Well, the thoughts that I will share is preseason set on 4th in Florida that I believe 7-5 gets us another year. Beginning of the season, I don't think it should have started out that way. I think I had also said a good coach gets you 6-1 going in. Definitely doesn't get blown out at home in the first 2 FBS home games against Miami and A&M, and there's lots of frustration. Then we go to Knoxville and have several coaching errors that really cost Florida the game. And of course, lots of noise in the system. Florida at the break before Georgia, they're 0-4 against winning teams. Comes out, plays Georgia competitively, even after DJ Lagway gets injured. And I'd say DJ Lagway, I hate to say that Graham Mertz getting injured ended up being a great thing for this team, but the team has the way it's rallied around Lagway and raises play. I mean, you and I met up in Jacksonville and we talked about how him in the game, raises both the offense and defense for the Gators. And he forces opposing defenses to cover more of the field because he can hit the deep throws that Graham Mertz hasn't. But end up falling to Georgia 0-5 against winning teams at that point, and then or 0-4, I guess I should say, because 0-5 ended up being Texas since we played 7. But then that's when we see the timing of the vote of confidence, I guess you could say, from Scott Strickland, and I don't think that timing was right. But then we get blown out by Texas. Granted, we didn't really have a good starting quarterback. I do think you should at least have a competent third string, which it doesn't appear we do. And that just means can make some general throws, which we were saying very inconsistently. But without getting to that, the timing of that message and that happening wasn't good. There's a screenshot that's been shared all over Gator Twitter of Scott Strickland's vote of confidence. I believe this was on the ESPN telecast or the ABC telecast of how Billy Napier will be here for years to come. Scott Strickland's being shown on the sideline, and the score line is 42-0. Honestly, one of the most lopsided score lines, 42 points I've ever seen in my time watching the Gators. And I've seen some bad teams. But then the next week, DJ Lagway returns and two straight upsets. And now Florida's looking at potentially that 7-5, which I had said is what we need to get to see that year 4. So definitely a lot of momentum out of time where it wasn't looking at. Is 2-5, to get specifically to your question, is 2-5 against winning teams where Florida should be? No. Definitely need to be much better than that. However, based on where we were and where we are now, I'd say much better timing. If I'm going to be 2-5 against winning teams, at least it's the last 2 I've played, and not we beat Miami and Texas A&M, and then we fell off a cliff, for the next 5 big games. Again, Graham, we've got to win this rivalry game and do it on the road. Billy Napier has not, he's only won 2 rivalry games as the Gators head coach. I don't believe either of them have been on the road. First one was Tennessee last year. Second one was LSU just last week or 2 weeks ago. But he's not been well on the road. So this will be a big one to at least say, here's another box to check. Okay, we won a rivalry game on the road. No matter how bad you are, that's still something. Come out and show us, play well on the road. I mean, I think it also makes a difference. I believe you said like, hey, 27-20 is or some sort of close scoreline makes you feel much better. Where if this is a close scoreline, FSU fans feel better. But as a Gator fan, seeing the 2-9 FSU team and knowing Billy struggles on the road, it's like, cool, we got the win, but how much have we turned a corner? It's great to look, and I believe the last 2 games have shown more of a turning of the corner, but you got to keep momentum, which is another thing that the Gators have struggled with. And I believe I saw on Twitter today, someone put Billy Napier's only won 3 games in a row one time at Florida, and that was against McNeese State, Tennessee, and Charlotte last year. So hasn't put it together against Power 4 teams in a row. So lots of things to look forward to. Definitely looking up, but to say it's where it needs to be, no. But I think it's possible to recognize we're not where we need to be, but also be happy for where we are versus where we could be, especially how the season started.
Yeah, man, I like some of the things that you're telling me. I don't think it's going to matter because we're historically bad, but I like some of the things you're telling me. But no, I mean, I will say, like, as obviously not a Florida fan, I think it's hard to deny the momentum. I mean, obviously getting those wins against LSU and against Ole Miss, and then, closing out the season with probably a rivalry win, and then maybe a bowl win too. It's hard to deny the momentum. The recruiting has obviously, you've raided our cabinet, that's for sure. Yeah. The recruiting you got to be happy about that. And so I think it's kind of one of those where you look back to Florida State in 2021, right? Now, obviously you didn't start 0-4, but you didn't have the start that you wanted to. But then you saw things kind of just shift and change. And that's when, like, we really just let Jordan take over the offense. And we finished that season 5-3. And then you come into the next year, you win 10 games. And then the year after that, you win 13 games. So, I think sometimes it's just that late season momentum can really buoy you into a big season the next year. And so obviously the good thing is you have the quarterback of the future. It's not like you're going to, where like this year we had a lot of momentum, but then we had to start over with basically a whole new kind of offensive, lost a lot of our big weapons, lost our quarterback. You don't have any questions about who you got playing quarterback there, because Lagway is obviously, he's a true freshman, so he's not perfect, but he's been playing well for you guys. And so that's obviously something to hang your hat on too, because that was really the one thing that I had said in the preseason was I feel like having Lagway in the fold, if he does well, like a lot of people expected, that was what was going to be, Billy Napier's kind of bird in the bush. That was what was going to get him that next year. It's funny that you mentioned it, because I said the same thing. I said it quietly because I didn't want to make it sound like I would ever want anyone to get hurt or injured, obviously, right? But when Mertz went down, and I've said this on our show before, I was like, I know they were playing him before, but when they were forced to push him into the starter role, it was kind of like that might have just saved Billy Napier's job for the next year, because he did excel. If things had went poorly, maybe not, but with the way he's been playing, I think you're like, okay, we can see it, right? And that's what you want. That's where the momentum in recruiting is coming. And just, I'll share some thoughts on our season just to kind of go back and forth with this, and then we'll jump into this game, man. Obviously, nobody expected Florida State to be here. I mean, no, even Nick Saban himself said that. I thought we'd see a drop off, being that we had lost so many NFL players, and a lot of the players that we've lost are doing good in the NFL. So you can tell they were real difference makers. And when you just look at this 2024 Florida State team, you don't have anybody like a Jared Verse, like a Keon Coleman, like a Jordan Travis. You just don't have anybody there like that. So I didn't think it would be this bad. And I think it's really head scratching how we got here, because you should still beat teams like Boston College. You should still beat teams like Duke. You should still beat a Memphis. And so it's really head scratching. But I think there are some warts that got exposed where this coaching staff should have been overhauled after the 2022 season. They got covered up by a lot of things, by a lot of the players that they were able to grab out of the portal. But really, I think now it is what it is, man. Like, this season happened. You can't put it back in the box. The question that we have now is, like, this 2024 offseason is going to be one of the most crucial offseasons in program history, because I am a believer that in the NIL and the portal era, you can flip a team with one good offseason. I mean, we've seen it with Colorado, went from 4 wins to 8 wins. Arizona State went from 3 wins to 9 wins. You've seen it happen in the past. Pitt is another team, went from 3 wins up to 7 so far. So you can see it, but we're starting over from scratch. And I think the thing that concerns us is, it's one thing to be starting over under a new coaching staff and selling a message when you took over a bad team. It's another thing to be selling a rebuild whenever you created the mess. And so that's what worries me the most, is that, like, these were Mike Norvell's hires. These were Mike Norvell's coaches. These were Mike Norvell's processes that got us here. And so that's what makes us nervous. But I think if we go out, I think at this point, I'm just excited to see who we get as our coordinators. I think we're going to end up getting Brennan Marion, who should bring the go-go offense from UNLV. I would be excited about that. I don't know about the DC yet. I think it's probably maybe going to be Scott Simons from SMU. And then we're going to have to hit the portal hard. And that's not what we wanted to do in year 5. But I think we can get back there. But, I think the last thing I'll say about it is, as far as Mike Norvell goes, I think when you look at Mike Norvell, this is unbelievable how this happened. And I know they had to deal with a situation that has never been dealt with in college football before, with the playoff thing that happened last year. I just don't want to get into a cycle of like a Nebraska, like you saw with Miami and even Florida at times, where you just keep hiring and firing and hoping it's going to fix it, because there's no guarantee the next guy coming in is going to do good. And Mike Norvell has won 19 straight and won a conference title. And a lot of good coaches have never done that. But I think the trust factor is always, this season is going to live in the back of our mind forever. You're never going to trust him to not have this. And we didn't think this was going to be in there. So really, I'm hyper focused on what this offseason is going to look like going into 2025. I think if they get to 7 to 8 wins, bowl eligible, I think you get 2026 if things look better. I think if you have another season like this, that'll be it. You'll pull the plug on that. At the same time, it can't look this bad again. It just can't. But I think if they can get back to bowl eligibility, like 8 wins next year, I think you'll be fine. But at the end of the day, they got to recruit better too. I mean, that's point blank period. They have to recruit better from the high school ranks, because obviously it's not been good enough. They didn't recruit off successful seasons. So this is why our class is falling apart off a bad season. So, I mean, it is what it is, man. Like I said, the season has happened. Let's just focus on the offseason and let's get into next year, and hopefully we can fix this thing. So, that's just kind of where I'm at. I think that's where most Florida State fans at. A lot of people want Mike Norvell fired. A lot of people just, I think if we make good hires and get a good portal class, people will be willing to wait that extra year. So that's just kind of where I'm at. And if you're good with it, we can go ahead and transition into this game on Saturday. Florida State, Sunshine Showdown, as they call it. Not the most intimidating name for a rivalry. It's not my favorite. But it is a night game, 7 p.m. inside Doak Campbell Stadium. Obviously, it's going to be, under renovations. I'm sure most Florida fans are aware of that. Our capacity is about 55,000 this year. I do expect this to be a pretty packed game. I think Florida fans will travel well because, they smell blood in the water. I think Florida State fans, because it's the last game and it's a rivalry, that, they may be a little bit, ready to see this game play out. So I do think it will be a good crowd. Florida obviously comes into this game as the favorite by 14.5 points to a little over 2 touchdowns. I'll get your thoughts on this, man, but I thought that spread was a little generous. I did not think Florida State probably was going to be that close of a favorite. Over-under here is at 45.5 points. That puts you, if you break that spread down, to around a 30-16 win. I think you had pretty much already said you'd be disappointed with a game like that. For us, look, there are no moral victories in Tallahassee. But I think if you walked out of that game like 31-17, you would just be like, okay, well, it wasn't as bad as I expected. Let's get this over with and let's get on to the season. And so, yeah, man, give me some thoughts on that spread and kind of what you're looking at there. And then we'll get into some offense and defense.
Yeah, I think that spread was a little low just based on the DJ Lagway factor and also how our defense has played the last few weeks. And then also the season that I've watched Florida State had. I have said that that anything less than 20 for a game, just where these teams have really separated the last few weeks, I would be disappointed. Now, I'm always happy with a win over Florida State. Growing up, most people know my number one rival for Florida is Florida State, and you can kind of tell what generation of Gator you are by who's the number one rival. Growing up, always had problems with Florida State, Tennessee. Both were top 5 matchups with us every year, and Tennessee's kind of fallen off as we've won like 19 of 22 or something. I'd have to look up the exact number. I know that they've only beaten us 3 times since 2005. Been there all 3 times, but that is that. Meanwhile, Florida State, there's just something about, in-state rivalry. And of course, some people say Georgia, but that's because they've grown up when we've had these difficulties. Me growing up is Bobby Bowden, Florida State, and, Peter work done. And then we went on the nice run in the mid 2000s, and then Jimbo Fisher comes in and pretty much has a good run against Florida. And then we get Dan Mullen, we get to, and then don't get to play 2020, win without a coach in 2021, 2022, 2023. You guys beat us. So now I'm like, okay, I've only seen us beat Florida State like 4 times since 2009. I need to see it. And when there is blood in the water, like you're talking, I want to see us win big. The question is whether or not we see Billy Napier allowed that. Of course, I've joked with you and people that watch. Billy Napier has never really shown I want to, win by 40 or 50. There are times it seems like he almost tries to just start getting the clock moving once he's up, 7 to 14 points or something like that. So we'll see. I hope we see it bigger than the spread, but I could also see, we get up and, hey, let's just end the game healthy and do that. But we'll see. Hopefully I'm wrong and I get lots of angry comments. There's no way we're going to win by 100. And hopefully by me putting it out there in the universe, I've said, I just don't know if I see it. Hopefully that reverse jinxes things, as other things I've said tend to do from time to time.
Yeah, no. And it's funny you mentioned that, because I always grew up as, I think Miami was a little bit more of my hated rival versus Florida. But I think a lot of that is because Miami doesn't have anybody but us. You guys have the other rivals, the Georgia, the Tennessee, and all that. And so, but then when this game comes around, you remember how heated it is. And it's funny because my wife's a Georgia fan. And so we go to Georgia, Florida every year. That's why we were, hanging out at the game there. And I always tell her, I'm like, watch, if I wear Florida State stuff, I bet you more Gator fans say something to me than to you, because there's just something about that in-state rival. But yeah, when I saw that spread, man, and keep in mind, this is going to be co-shared on our channel. So we're going to be talking to FSU fans and Florida fans. So I don't mean this disrespectfully, but I do think the reason I think the spread was small is I don't think we're going to score a lot of points in this game, because our offensive line is terrible. You had told me that your defensive line was playing really good. So I don't think we're going to score much, but I did go back and I did some research on Florida for our preview that we just put up on the channel. And I think a lot of that is because I throw out the Samford game because that's an FCS team, right? And I equally throw out Charleston Southern for us. But then you look at Florida had 2 other games where they kind of had an offense explosion: the Kentucky game and the Mississippi State game. Lagway didn't have a touchdown in either one of those. And so I think where it's kind of Florida's offense outside of those 2 explosive games have averaged 21 points per game, 20.75 to be exact. And so I think it's where it's I think they're going to hold us to not scoring a lot, but our defense is much better than our offense, and they're not great. But I think if our defense shows up and actually plays inspired football, I think we can keep Florida to that 30-ish point range because, LSU doesn't have a great defense. They have never really played great defense. And then Ole Miss is good defense, not great. I think you guys were 24 and 27 in both of those. So we're not as good as either one of those teams, obviously. But I do think that it may be something where we can hold you guys to that 30-point range. It's just a question of whether we can score or not. And that's what I'm worried about. Obviously, the unique thing here is that we're both going to be starting freshman quarterback in this game. And I heard someone on our media this week in our press conference mention, I think that's the first time in the history of this rivalry that both teams have started a freshman quarterback. Obviously, DJ Lagway comes in with more experience in big games. He's obviously started, 2 big games for you guys. Luke Kromenhawk, who's starting for us, got his very first start last week against Charleston Southern, had a good game. But again, you can't take much away from playing one of the worst teams in FCS. But I do think it was good for his confidence to get in there, get in some rhythm. Mike Norvell talked about in the press conference where you could see him gain a little bit of understanding of the offense. There's less looking at the sideline, more just running the offense. So I think it will be good for him. Those snaps will be good for him. So I do think that's where it's going to be a little bit close. I think this will maybe be a little bit of a low-scoring game. We'll just have to see. Man, really, the sad thing to say is, I just think it depends on how invested Florida State is in this game. If they show up and they play hard, and they played hard against Charleston Southern, and I did not think they were going to show up, a 130 kick against a one-win team, FCS team. I thought they could lay down in that game, but they played hard. So if they play hard against Florida, I think we can make it an okay game. I don't really see a whole lot of winning. So we can kind of talk about the offense and defensive side of things here. So, one thing that worries me here is for Florida's offense, and you can tell me if I'm right or wrong here, but for you guys' offense, I see you run the ball pretty well, and that's something, at about 150 yards on the ground average, which, maybe not is the most elite running offense, but our rush defense is very hit or miss. We love to give up some 200-yard games. So if we can't stop the run, I think we're in trouble. And, I think we need to put the pressure on Lagway, and I think we need to make him win this game with his arm, because I looked at it coming into this, 9 touchdowns, 6 interceptions. 3 of those touchdowns came against Samford. So you're at about a 6-6 ratio there against Power 4 teams. Only one game with multiple touchdowns. It just happened to be last week against Ole Miss. So he's obviously getting better, but I think if we can put the game on Lagway's arm, that's our best chance. I don't know that we still have that much of a chance, you know what I mean? But I think from a defensive standpoint, for Florida State, I think the game plan should be you got nothing to lose, first off. Bring the heat, load the box, make Florida pass the ball to win, make a freshman quarterback make decisions, and win this game with his arm. And we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, so I would definitely say a good strategy is trying to stop the run of Billy Napier. I would point out Ole Miss last week going into game number 2 in the country, only allowing 100 or not even 100, 80 yards per game, 79.9. I actually pulled up my notes while you're saying it. And last week we put over 160. I will say on DJ Lagway, that touchdown interception ratio is a bit deceiving at times. Even let's just go that 6-6, like you mentioned, we can't take much from Samford. But for example, the Kentucky game, Jaden Baugh, 5 touchdowns on the ground. Several of those set up by big throw by DJ Lagway. Guy gets tackled at the 5. Well, then Billy Napier, who seems at times allergic to trying to pass inside the red zone, runs the ball. And I mean, we score. Nothing wrong with it. But it's also hey, yes, we didn't throw for any touchdowns against Kentucky. But at the same time, there was a lot of great, passing offense that happened. Or last week, hit a big 41-yarder on our touchdown, our go-ahead touchdown drive to set up a Wildcat 9-yard touchdown run by Montrell Johnson. So, but if I had to say, if I were scouting Florida, you're right. stop that run, try and make DJ Lagway and these receivers beat you. One thing I've critiqued Napier on is his passing play design. With that said, whether it's Aiden Mizell, who scored the first touchdown against Georgia, the over-the-top, deep ball for the 43-yard touchdown, whether it's Kamira DK or Elijah Badger, there are a lot of guys who can get open deep on this team, and now having a quarterback that can beat them, I think that helps out because we've talked about Mertz, generally past 10 yards. You didn't have to worry, but now you've got to worry. So can you commit the guys in the box to really commit to stop the run when you've got, if DJ Lagway can be at least somewhat accurate in hitting, a few deep balls, because you hit that deep ball, well, then now we want to make sure we play receivers. And then that little bit of a crease allows a Montrell Johnson, Jaden Ball, Jacoby Jackson to get the run. But I was shocked last week that they ran as well as they did on an Ole Miss team that had been very, very good against the run. But I'll go with what I believe to be a defensive key, since you talked about FSU and get your response for us. I would say definitely for us, you're talking about, we need to put the game on our, in Lagway's arm. For us, we definitely want to force your quarterback to drop back to pass. Florida, the last 2 weeks against decent offensive lines for Ole Miss and for LSU, have gotten 11 combined sacks. 4 last week, 7 against LSU. Defensive line has been playing at a whole new level since the Texas game went south. So it'll be interesting to see this matchup, because if we can't get pressure with 4, that's where we've seen Florida have lots of problems. But we've been getting pressure the last 2 weeks with 4. Now, sometimes it's a simulated pressure. So you could have Jack Pyburn, our outside linebacker, stand-up defensive end, however you want to label the position. There are times he'll drop into coverage. Heck, he had a pick in the Georgia game off a tip ball. He'll drop into coverage. Meanwhile, you have Shamar James, our middle linebacker, blitzing in. So you're still only rushing 4, but can things like that also trick a young quarterback who just had his first start last week and potentially get those turnovers? So I do think for this game, it starts up front for the Gators on defense.
Oh, man, I really can't echo that enough. And that's really the key to this one for me when you look at Florida State, is the fact that, I think when it all boils down in this game, I look at Florida's defense and I'm like, okay, well, you got 107 in pass, 87 in run, and I look at all that. But I also see that you're top 25 in sacks. And I see that you tell me that the defensive line's been playing good. I see that you're 12th in red zone defense. That is what makes me nervous, because our offensive line is obviously, it is one of the worst in the Power 5, probably one of the worst in the FBS across the board. We actually struggled early on last week to push Charleston Southern around. And so I think this is going to be what loses us the game. I mean, for good or bad with Florida State, look, we got a lot of problems. That is to be understood. 90% of our problems stem from this offensive line. They are just bad. So if you tell me you had 7 sacks against LSU, I'm sweating, because it's probably going to be 7 or 8 sacks against FSU, because our offensive line is just, it's abysmal, man. It is. They're terrible. And so I will say Luke is got some legs so he can move around, but as long as you can stop a wide receiver screen, we're cooked, because that is 90% of Mike Norvell's play calls. A couple of deep shots here, 90% wide receiver screens, and a couple of runs. So, if you can bottle us up, we might be in trouble. And I really do think, I know we'll get into some predictions here towards to wrap this thing up, but man, I think when I look at this game from a big, overall, to kind of wrap up my final thoughts on this one. So I look at this game the one thing, if I'm a Florida State fan and I'm grasping for a path to victory in this game, I do like that Florida State did have the bye week right before Charleston Southern. I'm sure they already did some install for Florida there. Obviously, you get a rest week there. I know there's the rest versus rust conversation, but it's late in the season. We have a lot of guys beat up. You needed that. Our starters only played about half the game against Charleston Southern, about half the snaps there, so that should help them be fresh for this game. Whereas, obviously, you guys had that hard-fought game against Ole Miss. I don't think Florida's going to overlook FSU in this game. Despite coming off of that big win, as bad as we are, I think they're going to want that revenge against Florida State. So I don't think it's going to be an overlook type of scenario there. So I hope Florida State is at least fresh, and I hope they come into this game and fight hard. That's really what I'm looking for from this team. I think if the defense plays well, they can keep us in it in the first half. But I think Florida is, they got a lot of momentum right now, and they're going to ride that momentum, and they're probably going to pull away in the second half. So, I told you before we started recording, I don't really know where Florida is. Obviously, you have the late momentum there with the win over LSU and the win over Ole Miss. The rest of the wins are over a lot of bad teams. LSU doesn't have a lot of good wins on their resume this year. So how good is Florida? I don't know. But how bad is Florida State? That I do know. And so I don't trust them to win this game. Now, I like maybe the mentality of coming into this game off of a win when they've been on a 6-game losing streak. Because, if you played football, man, it's a tough sport. And your mentality after losing 6 games in a row is in the dumps. And so being able to come into this game off a win has to give their psyche a little bit of a lift. I think we've just got so many problems. I think everybody's looking forward to this season being over. So, if they play hard, I think they give Florida a game. But at the end of the day, I got Florida winning something around 34-13.
And you know what? I would take 34-13, 21 points. That's over the 20 I want to see. One thing that is kind of an intangible, but we're talking about motivation or overlooking. I talked about before the Ole Miss game. I said this senior class of the true seniors at Florida have never had a winning season. If you beat Ole Miss, you all but guarantee it because you're not going to end possibly 6-6, or if we were to lose to Florida State, however unlikely, 5-7, but 6-6, and then you're hoping for a luck of a bowl draw, where in 2022 we were 6-6, had opt-outs, and we faced a 10-win Oregon State team and got blown out, end up with a losing season. So take away the luck of the bowl draw and beat Ole Miss, get that 6 win, and then you've got what looks to be a solid chance at a win against Florida State. So this is a chance for them to secure that winning season in the season instead of another 6-6 season, because 3 of the last 5 years have been, or if we were to go 6-6, 3 of the last 4 years, would be 6-6 with 1 5-7, and it just seemed like more of the same. So I think there's motivation there. I also think being on a 2-game losing streak when arguably we could have or should have won the last 2 Florida State games. Everyone's been throwing out how Florida is 2-10 against rivals under Billy Napier. Like, there are so many things that these players have been hearing that I think we can't. I don't imagine how these players could overlook a game where, maybe back in the Tim Tebow years where we had won 5-6 straight games, maybe that happens, but where you have all these other things in your ear all the time, you're seeing on social media, there's motivation there to come and get that win that probably in some ways is more valued among your fan base than even those LSU and Ole Miss wins, especially a chance to win on the road. Another thing that has been critiqued this year, I'm trying to outside of a bad, probably 2-10 Mississippi State team, Florida's not won on the road. So lots of motivation to come in for that. I probably think I'm about where you are, 31-10 as far as scores. I would like to see more, but like I said, I think there are some, just the way Billy Napier coaches, I don't see him, going for the throat or trying to put up a ton of points if it becomes a decent spread. So we'll see. Definitely look forward to seeing you in Tallahassee. It was good seeing you in Jacksonville. And, it's the final week of this season already. Can't believe it's there. It seems like the two of us and Night Bingle were just recording our offensive previews not too long ago. And here we are, at least one of us, unfortunately, depending on perspective, kissing goodbye to college football teams cheering for the year. But heck, that was us last year after the game. So, we only get a few of these Saturdays a year. Got to enjoy them while they're here, right?
Yeah, no, I agree, man. And, for me, I just hope it's a good game on Saturday. I know you guys don't want it to be. I just hope it's a good game. I think if Florida State plays inspired, they could maybe make it a good game. I just say, hey, Mike Norvell, look, man, you got nothing to lose. If you don't kick an onside in this game, if you don't go for a couple of fourths or fake a couple of punts or something like that, man, what are we even doing here? Because you got nothing to lose. But I agree, man. It's been a dreadful season. I can't wait for it to be over. Obviously, we never expected to be this bad, but college football is the love of our sports life, and so like you said, you only get so many of these. I mean, I'm driving all the way down. I live in some of you know, some of you don't, all the way in Charlotte, North Carolina. So I'm making a 7-hour trip to watch a 2-9 team play in that game. So I'm dedicated. I'm there. But man, looking forward to Saturday. It's supposed to be good weather in Tallahassee. It's a night game. Those are always my favorite. Always fun. Going to be tailgating. Obviously, you'll be stopping by as well. So looking forward to it, man. Again, it's a rivalry game, and rivalry games are what make college football great. So as much as I'm looking forward to the season being over, I'm also looking forward to Saturday and these two teams facing off. So excited for it, man. And, hopefully we'll get Fourth and Florida back on track soon.
Yep. And I guess we should give our socials out real quick. So if they want to find us, and if Gator fans or, FSU fans want to come and tell me that anything I've said is insane, I guess come find me on X at Gator Podcast. You can find the Gator Truth Florida Football Podcast on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcasts.
Yeah, man. And they're going to do it. And I will say that Gator fans have invaded my Twitter or my Facebook page this week. It has been a absolute crap show there this week. So it has been a war zone there. But yeah, if you want to check us out, Plant the Spear 1 on X, Plant the Spear on Facebook. Also, obviously here on YouTube, we are Plant the Spear. We also have a website, plantthespear.com, where you can find links to everything. All of our videos, written articles, everything is over there. So appreciate you guys keeping up with us throughout the season and looking forward to Saturday.
Yep. Well, it's been fun. I'll see you on Saturday, and go Gators.
Go Noles.